All right. It is now 6:03. I'm calling the meeting to order for the June 15th Redevelopment Commission meeting. Prior to taking roll call tonight, staff will be swearing in our new commissioner, Adam Baugh.
So you're going to repeat after me. Please raise your right hand. I, Adam Baugh, do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution and laws of the state of Arizona and the ordinances of the town of Gilbert, Maricopa County, Arizona. Of the town of Gilbert, Maricopa County, Arizona. That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same and defend them against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And that I will faithfully and impartially discharge the duties of the office of a Town of Gilbert Redevelopment Commission member in Gilbert, Arizona, according to the best of my ability. So help me God, or I do affirm. All right, wonderful. Congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Welcome aboard. Appreciate you joining us, and pleasure to serve with you, and we look forward to working with you. If staff would please take roll call.
Chair Clausen.
Present.
Vice Chair Kendall.
Here.
Commissioner Baugh. Commissioner Updike.
Here.
Commissioner Bigelow.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. At this time, members of the public may comment on matters not on the agenda. The Commission's response is limited to responding to criticism, asking staff to review a matter commented upon, or asking that a matter be put on a future agenda. Are there any communications from citizens at this time?
Chair Clausen, we do not.
All right. With that, we move into administrative item number 1, considering approval of minutes for the regular meeting held on March 16th. Are there any edits the Commission wishes to make? Do I have a motion for the Redevelopment Commission regular meeting and study session minutes for March 16th, 2022?
I motion to approve the meeting minutes of March 22nd, 2022. Was it 22nd or 16th? It's March 16th, 2022.
Do I have a second?
I second.
All right. With that, I'll take a roll call vote. Commissioner Baugh?
I don't think I can vote on this.
You're probably correct. That would be accurate. And Commissioner, your new last name, I apologize. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yes.
Updike.
Okay.
Two for a second.
Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, Updike. And I approve.
Okay. Commissioner Bigelow?
I approve.
Commissioner Kendall?
Approve.
And I approve as well. We will now move on to the second administrative item, which is a presentation from staff on planning case types. If staff would please come forth to provide a presentation on this item.
Ready? All right. Thank you, Chairman. Happy to be here tonight. So we thought it would be a good idea to just give kind of an overview of all that planning does. I know when we brought the Heritage North project to you, it was a lot. It was a lot of application types. And so we thought it was a good time to kind of step back and explain a little bit more about what we do, the role of the Redevelopment Commission, what your powers are, an overview of all of the planning case types that we review, how staff reviews them before they come to you. That's okay. And then what happens after the Redevelopment Commission reviews a project. Before we get into that, I wanted to just kind of cover what the Planning Division is, who we are. I think to this point, this particular commission has just seen Ava and I here. But there is a much larger team beyond us. So Ava is our planning manager. I serve as principal planner, and then I oversee our 11 staff members. We have 2 senior planners. One is currently vacant. We have 3 planner 2s, 2 planner 1s. We also have some planning technicians and planning specialists that assist our customers at the front counter, answer a lot of phone calls and a lot of emails for us. We review quite a bit of projects. So on average, we will see anywhere between 40 to 60 new projects in a month that are divided amongst our planning staff. You can see that at the end of May, we had a total of 209 active cases that we're managing across our staff. So we've got a pretty hefty caseload. You guys are lucky that you only get to see things in the Heritage District. Our last Planning Commission meeting, I think we had 26 items on our agenda. So this is a good group to be part of. In terms of the documents that staff reviews, that planning reviews, and that the Redevelopment Commission is tasked with overseeing, we have our visioning documents. So our general plan, our redevelopment plan, those are the big picture, high-level documents that kind of set the framework for how we envision the town of Gilbert as we grow, as we build out. Our general plan is a 10-year plan. Every 10 years we update that plan. We did ours in 2020, so we've got our 2020 general plan that kind of forecasts to build out, but we'll take a look in 10 years and see if it still makes sense. Similarly, the redevelopment plan is revisited over time to make sure that it still meets the vision of the district. In terms of implementation standards, we have a number of tools that we utilize. We have our land development code that sets the standards for development, talks about building height, setbacks, parking ratios, basically anything that as people build and develop, we want to make sure that we're meeting the intent of our general plan. We're creating safe places that function. We also have our Heritage District Design Guidelines, which I know you all are very familiar with. Those set kind of the standards for the Heritage District. They've got specific landscape palettes, materials. It talks about the historic architecture along Gilbert Road, those different theming areas. And then we also have the municipal code that touches things like our lighting is within that, noise. So, if we start talking about having outdoor entertainment type uses, we have to make sure that they're designed in a way that we know they can comply with our noise ordinance that's part of the Muni code. And then in terms of other implementation items, we've got our capital improvement plan and infrastructure improvement plan, and then current and future studies and plans. So, we've got a Heritage District parking plan and just a number of other studies that we complete to help us make sure that we're growing in the way that we want to. So the role of our Redevelopment Commission it was created to encourage development and redevelopment in the Heritage District overlay and other redevelopment areas designated by the Town Council, consistent with any adopted redevelopment plan and other applicable requirements. So that is what this Redevelopment Commission is tasked with. The powers come from the Arizona Revised Statutes. Article 3 allowed us to create a redevelopment district. And then the Redevelopment Commission serves as the design review board for projects in the Heritage District. In your role as the design review board, you review design reviews in the district, heritage sign plans, and those are items that you are responsible for making the final decision on. So you're the approving body on those items. You serve as the recommending body on our general plan amendments within the district, rezonings, and use permits. Those go on to either Planning Commission or Town Council from your recommendation. And then you also serve as just Heritage District advisors as it relates to the redevelopment plan and CIP projects and those ancillary HD plans and studies. So kind of stepping back to talk about the different planning applications, we thought it would be a good idea to kind of walk you through the process that these go through before they come to the Redevelopment Commission. So a number of our application types require neighborhood meetings before they even approach staff and come in for a pre-application meeting. we want to ensure with our rezoning applications, general plan applications, in some instances conditional use permits, that our applicants understand kind of the feel of the neighborhood. They understand concerns that people might have so that they can adjust their plans before they even come and talk to staff. So that's the first step. Those are held by the applicant. They have to submit a letter to staff that we review and make sure that it's accurate before they send it out, and then staff attends those meetings as well to hear some of that dialogue. So that's the first step in a few of our applications. From there, applications that are moving forward will submit for a pre-application meeting. That's the first time that staff has an opportunity to really look at a project. The initial review includes staff members from planning, engineering, traffic, building and fire, and then anybody else as needed. If it's in the Heritage District, often Amanda or Sydney will attend as well. Sometimes we need to loop in water resources or environmental services, depending on the use. So those are kind of that first opportunity for an applicant to receive feedback from the town on what our requirements will be, whether or not their plan meets our standards, if it's a project that we can really support and get on board with. From there, they'll submit their application if they're choosing to move forward, and it'll go through a staff review process. So similar to the pre-application meeting, it's reviewed by a lot of those same departments: planning, engineering, traffic, building, environmental services, water resources. And about the time that we're completing our first review, we like to bring it to the Redevelopment Commission for a study session. We like to be able to provide staff comments really about the same time that we're providing them comments from you, so that they can incorporate all of those into their application and their revisions, rather than getting ours, resubmitting, then getting yours, and have to go back to the drawing board. So sometimes in those study sessions, you get it at a pretty early stage. There are times when we don't bring it that early, and it's if there are pretty significant comments from staff, and we anticipate the application changing in a way that what you're reviewing in that initial review won't be what it ultimately becomes. So there are times that we don't do it that early on, but often that first look that you get is pretty preliminary. And so that kind of brings us to the application types and which ones you'll review. We'll also talk about the administrative actions and the things that staff reviews that you might not see. So starting with our design review. Design reviews are the application that looks at site plan, landscaping, grading and drainage, lighting, elevations, colors and materials, all of those things that you may remember from both Cimino Gelato and the Heritage North project. So these go through that process that I talked about from a pre-app. So design reviews don't require a neighborhood meeting, but they do have a pre-app, staff review, study session, and then we bring it to Redevelopment Commission for that final hearing. The Redevelopment Commission is, as I mentioned, the approving body on design reviews. One of the things we wanted to talk about today too with these different application types is kind of what the RDC's purview is, the things that you can comment on with the applications. So because these are really related to site design, elevations, things like that, we're looking for feedback from RDC on architecture, the layout of the site. If you think that something doesn't make sense, or the layout might negatively impact an adjoining property owner, those are things you can comment on. You can comment on the landscape palette. Sometimes we'll see that our commissions want to add larger trees or more trees or different kinds of trees, just as an example. But one of the things that we can't really talk about with design review applications is uses. If it has a zoning district and there's a list of permitted uses, those are permitted uses. And so through the design review process, we can't prohibit any specific use.
Commissioner Bigelow, I apologize. Can you turn on your mic? Thank you so much.
We can comment on architecture, layout, landscape palette, color, materials, site details, but we are not here to double check that the ratios of tenants versus parking and handicap spaces and trash can usage and, flow of traffic. That's not what we're here to do.
So, Commissioner Bigelow, things like parking ratios are not within your purview because those are set by the Land Development Code.
Perfect.
However, things like circulation of the site, if you've got concerns with how the site flows, those are things that you could comment on. Say we're presenting an application to you where at the primary entry you're driving right in and looking straight into a compactor, and you don't like that. That's a comment you can make is can you take a look at this compactor orientation and find another location for it. So it's kind of a fine line. There are setback standards, for example. You can't say, I want you to increase your setback, but you could say, I'm concerned about the impact of this use or the drive-through lane this close to this adjoining use. Can you reorient the drive-through?
That's perfect. Yeah, I just want to make sure because I feel like sometimes we get caught in the weeds of like what engineering and what everyone else has already done to bring it to this point, and it's like they're double checking that there's fire hydrants, that there's trash cans and parking and all that, and we're just purely just more of the design review part and just the overall idea and concept. Make sure it's cohesive to what downtown Gilbert is. So
yeah, and Commissioner Bigelow, I will just add that staff will bring it to a hearing when we feel confident that it meets all of our standards.
Perfect.
In terms of, meeting our retention requirements, parking requirements. So it won't come to you if there are issues with compliance with the Land Development Code.
The only, circumstance that would or could affect it potentially would be as if somebody is presenting a building that is higher than, that is taller or bigger than what the redevelopment guidelines have laid out, because that is a structural thing, but that also is a town issue, where they need to get approval if they're going to have height restrictions and go past that.
Yeah. And we'll get into that a little bit in one of our other case types. It's for a rezoning application and a PAD. So there are instances, and Heritage North, I think, is a perfect example of where you were reviewing the zoning case that impacted the design review because there was the height modification that impacted the parking study that's an administrative application. So they all kind of tie together. And so it can get really complex.
Cool. Perfect.
Are one of your next slides going to be a case type use permit?
Yes.
Okay, then I'll hold my question.
Okay. You don't have a hard one for me, right? All right, so in terms of RDC actions that you can take, you can approve an application, you can approve it and modify the conditions that staff has recommended. You can deny an application, or you can request a continuance if you're seeking additional information. I wanted to touch on the denial piece of it and just maybe expand upon a little bit about why you might deny an application. So if an example with a design review might be that you find that it does not comply with the design guidelines. Like I mentioned before, you couldn't deny it because of the use that they're proposing, but maybe you want some changes based on some concerns you have with compliance with the design guidelines, and the applicant just says, no, I'm not going to do that. That's an opportunity where you might consider denial of an application. But again, I just want to reiterate, not because they're proposing a use that you don't want to see there, if it's allowed. We'll also talk about heritage sign plans. Heritage sign plans are kind of a unique application type. Sometimes they'll come to you, sometimes they won't. But they are an HSP is designed to provide compatibility across a project with their signage. So in the Heritage District, HSPs are required for nearly every application type. So a single or multi-use tenant, commercial or office building, a multi-building complex. And really the goal is to make sure that sign design is consistent, that we've made sure that there's sufficient sign placement. You can see, it's kind of hard to see, I guess on the top building on CoLab, we'll identify sign bands. So signs can be located in the area hashed in red at the very top as an example. So that's what HSPs do. Staff reviews them. They are reviewed by traffic and engineering. They don't go through the full review process. What engineering looks at is to make sure that they're not locating any monument signs on within utility easements, and then traffic makes sure that they're not going to cause any visibility concerns. But largely, it's a planning review. They can be approved administratively. So our land development code sets very specific provisions for signs and the development of signs, how much area that different buildings can have based on their linear frontage. So if a development is intending to comply with the land development code, those applications can be approved administratively. With an HSP, an applicant can request an increase in signage in certain circumstances. So they can request up to 25% additional signage if they receive approval from the Redevelopment Commission. So that's when RDC will see those HSPs, is when they're looking for something beyond what the code allows. Rooftop signs you'll also see, and so those are instances when you will review them, when it's something greater than what the code allows by right. So again, RDC reviews HSPs that aren't consistent with the sign standards. So with those, you can comment on materials, placement, what they're seeking in terms of an increase in signage perhaps, but you can't comment on the content of a sign. And then similar to the design review, you can approve these plans, you can modify conditions, you can deny them, or you can continue them if you want additional information.
With a denial, does the applicant have the ability to resubmit, or is it done?
They do, Commissioner Kendall. They have the ability to resubmit their application, and because all signs essentially in the Heritage District for non-residential uses require an HSP, they may choose to modify their application and not request any deviations, to increase allowances or things like that. But yeah, they have the opportunity to resubmit a revised plan.
And that goes beyond the HSP.
Can you clarify him?
The last slide was...
Yep. Yes,
Okay.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Can they appeal to Planning Commission?
They can. Yeah, I've got some slides at the end that talk about what happens after the Redevelopment Commission takes action on items. So our next case type is rezonings and general plan amendments. I'm going to talk about rezonings on the next slide as well, related to planned area development. So what I'm talking about here with regard to rezonings is a straight rezoning. So where an applicant is just seeking to change the zoning from one district to another, and they're not looking to modify any development standards. We consider that just a straight rezoning application. So a general plan amendment goes along with what I talked about in the beginning of this presentation. We've got that visioning document of our general plan. It's on the bottom right corner of the screen. That's our general plan land use map. It designates just generally areas for future development. So we have residential 2 to 3.5 dwelling units per acre, for example, is a lot of the yellow that's on there. The purple area that you see is a regional commercial zoning district. And so you can have multiple different zoning districts within these land use designations. So it's kind of this big picture plan. And when somebody's requesting a rezoning, it has to be consistent with that general plan. So often we'll see rezonings in conjunction with general plan amendments, because we have to take a look at our general plan and make sure that it matches that. So it can allow different land uses. They can go from residential to commercial. They can go from one commercial district to another commercial district. In the Heritage District, it's unlikely you'll see a lot of that, but I still think it's important because it's possible that something like that could come in. In terms of the approval process, these are application types that do require that neighborhood meeting like I talked about. So prior to it even being reviewed by staff at any formal level, they have to do a neighborhood meeting, pre-application meeting. Staff will review it. Then it comes to Redevelopment Commission for a recommendation, then goes to Planning Commission for a recommendation, and then Town Council takes action on those applications. So they're the final decision-making body. So really what when you're reviewing a zoning application or a general plan amendment, I often say that the question is, does this land use make sense at this location? You can look at all of the different use types that are allowed in that zoning district, and will it negatively impact, surrounding property owners? Does it make sense? Is there adequate, facilities in terms of transportation? Does it have utilities? Those types of questions. Through a straight rezoning, you can't limit the permitted uses, so you can't say that, we will approve this zoning district, but you can't have drive-throughs. And then you can't modify development standards through a straight rezoning. You can't increase setbacks. You can't decrease building heights, those types of items. Similar to the other applications, you can approve it. You can approve it with modified conditions. The types of conditions that you can add are kind of limited. So like I had mentioned, you can't modify any of the standards of the district through a condition with the straight rezoning. And then you could continue the application. Reasons you might deny a general plan amendment or a rezoning is if you just think the land use doesn't make sense, that the impacts of it might be negative to adjacent property owners. There's some findings that have to be met, in terms of it's not detrimental to the health, general welfare of surrounding property owners, and those types of items. So moving on to rezoning with a planned area development, PADs allow us to modify development regulations in order to create unique development. So we can decrease setbacks, we can increase building heights, and really what staff is looking for when we're doing a PAD is that there's a trade-off for it. There's a greater benefit to the community because we're modifying our development standards. So if somebody is seeking to decrease their setbacks, what's the trade-off for that? Are they doing it so they can provide greater open space or something along those lines? These applications they follow the same process as the other rezoning that I talked about, because it is a rezoning application. It just has that overlay district that allows us to modify some of those standards. So with that, it allows us to condition things a little bit more, add in some of those kind of trade-offs for the modified development standards. We ask that the decision-making bodies consider if the applicant has clearly demonstrated the benefit to Gilbert for those deviation requests. And then we can condition development standards. So we can say that all of the street frontage landscaping has to be installed as part of phase 1, as an example. We can talk about on-site and off-site improvements. We can ask them to develop design guidelines. And those are some of the things that we did with the Heritage North project. One of our conditions was that they had to establish design guidelines. One of the things you can't do, or some of the things that you can't do with PADs, is you can't modify land uses, you can't modify parking ratios, and then you can't modify signs or wall regulations. We've got some different provisions that allow you to modify signs and walls, so we don't do that through PADs. And then this follows the similar approval process to the typical rezoning. With regard to conditional use permits, these are applications that we require for uses that we think need some special consideration to make sure that there aren't negative impacts on surrounding property owners, or that it meets the vision of the town. So on the right, I've got a couple of examples of conditional use permits that we've processed in the Heritage District. Heritage North had 2 use permits. We had one to allow the hotel, and we had a second to allow multifamily on the ground floor. And then the top image is of a tattoo parlor. So those applications are ones that we just want to have a closer look at to make sure we have an opportunity to mitigate any potential negative impacts that it has, and just evaluate, does this really make sense at the location that they're proposing? These, depending on the use, sometimes staff will ask the applicant to hold a neighborhood meeting. It is within our purview to request that applicants hold neighborhood meetings on things that aren't required. So every now and then with use permits, we'll tell an applicant that they have to do a neighborhood meeting, but it isn't typically required. They go through the pre-application meeting process, staff reviews it. These use permits do require the full development services team review. And then Redevelopment Commission is a recommending body on use permits. Planning Commission is our decision-making body, so these don't go to town council unless appealed. So the RDC, in approving use permits, there are findings that have to be met. So will the use be detrimental to the health, safety, general welfare? Does it conform with our general plan? And will the use unreasonably interfere with the use and enjoyment of nearby properties? So same options for the Redevelopment Commission in terms of the approvals. So you can approve it, approve with modifications. You can deny an application if you don't feel like it can meet those findings, or you can continue it for additional information.
If I recall, and I think it was on a particular project, the conditional use permit then becomes permanent, correct?
There are revocation proceedings that can be taken if they fail to meet some of the conditions, or if they're not operating in as described. So they can be revoked, but we haven't had to do that here. So I don't know how onerous that process is.
A matter of, I guess, clarification would be helpful. I've always understood conditional use permits as uses that are allowed in the zoning ordinance, but require conditions to make sure they operate compatibly, and then the test, which is sort of a compatibility test. But I don't think it's in our purview to say this use isn't a good use in the area. I think the question is strictly limited to those elements right there.
Yep.
So sometimes I see people interpret use permits as sort of a land use question. Like when you talk about the design review, we focus on design, not uses. And when it comes to the use permit test, we should be focused on compatibility related to those 3 points right there. Okay.
Yeah, agreed. And really, we're taking a closer look at it to make sure that we're adding any conditions to make sure that it's a compatible use. So if there's, for some reason, we were to find that we can't mitigate the additional burden that this would place, I think that's when we could look at potentially denying an application. But I would agree they're conditionally approved uses.
And I just want to share this anecdote because I think it's helpful. I have had experience where someone said it was a use permit for a tattoo parlor, and they feel like tattoo parlor really didn't fit the image of the area, and that really isn't what the question is. The question are these ones here about compatibility with health, safety, general welfare standards. Does it comply with the balance of the zoning ordinance requirements and the general plan? But whether something is in line with the character of the area, I don't think is within the purview of the use permit.
I suppose you would look at the redevelopment plan as well, and make a determination of does this use meet that redevelopment plan, because that's part of the consideration too. I'm trying to think if there's,
if I may, the last meeting we had a gelato shop that's next to a crematory that's across the street from an ice cream shop, and we were told that the purview was not the nature of the business, but the actual structure and aesthetics.
Yeah, and I think that's a good example, because it's not within your purview if it's a good business decision for them to open an ice cream shop next to an ice cream shop next to an ice cream shop. My clicker isn't working, Jocelyn. All right, thanks. So I was also going to talk about preliminary plats, but what was interesting is as I was trying to pull up an image of of a preliminary plat that might be in the Heritage District. I was kind of scanning the Heritage District, and I don't know that this is something that you are likely to see, just given the development pattern of the district. But nonetheless, we'll talk about it. Preliminary plats are our first process that allows for the division of land. We look at them if they're dividing land into 5 or more lots. Outside of a commercial project. Commercial projects are often, all of the requirements are covered through a design review. So this would be for like a division of lots for residential. So the examples up on the screen are not in the Heritage District because I couldn't find an example. But these applications, just in case we ever were to see one, they require a pre-application meeting, staff review, where we're reviewing the landscaping, we're reviewing grading and drainage, we're reviewing compliance with lot dimensions, making sure that all of the lots ultimately would be buildable, that they could meet setbacks on all of the lots, and then traffic, of course, is going to review the circulation and make sure that the roads are designed appropriately. The RDC has a pretty limited purview on preliminary plats. Essentially, does the subdivision conform to the development standards of the Land Development Code? And then you can't modify any standards of the Land Development Code through a preliminary plat. Those are set through zoning, so we sometimes will have, when these are going through, we'll have a neighbor come and say, hey, can you limit the houses to single story on these lots? That's not something we can consider as part of a preliminary plat. All we're looking at is the division of lots and do they meet our standards. So you serve as a recommending body to Planning Commission on these applications. And then we also wanted to talk a little bit about administrative applications. There are things that staff review that won't come to the Redevelopment Commission. There are times that you will approve a project and maybe when you see it constructed, it looks a little bit differently, and it's because of some of our administrative processes. So we process administrative design review applications for structures that are less than 5,000 square feet. Pretty often, applicants need to revise their design review approvals in the field when they're starting to construct or sourcing materials or preparing their construction drawings. And so staff will review those applications, and as long as it's consistent with the original intent of that approval, we'll handle them administratively. If we feel that the application is modified in a significant way, we can always elevate it and bring it back to Redevelopment Commission to ask for your input and your review. HSPs, I kind of covered that when I went through those. Those can be approved administratively if they comply with all of the standards of the Land Development Code. For our administrative design review applications, we follow the same process that we do for a full design review. It goes through a pre-application meeting often, unless it's a really minor change. Sometimes they will go through that pre-application process, and then it does get reviewed by all of our departments. Unless an applicant is just seeking to modify colors, materials, building elevations, then that only is reviewed by the Planning Division. We also review administrative use permits. There aren't a ton of things that require administrative use permits. Shared parking, deferred parking, or off-site parking are all items that require an administrative use permit. Those are reviewed by staff, and those applications require that the applicant prepare a study by a traffic engineer, parking expert to show us why we would alter our parking requirements. And then we also review incidental dwelling units through administrative use permits. Incidental dwelling units are secondary dwelling units, so a second house on one property, or guest quarters, so a dwelling that doesn't include a full kitchen. And then again, these are just uses that just a little special consideration. It makes sense for planning to review them to make sure that they meet setbacks rather than going straight to building permit. And so that's why we require those. There is a public notification process as part of our administrative use permits. the applicant does have to notify surrounding properties within 300 feet. Those neighbors or those property owners can contact staff if they have questions, and then we weigh that, any feedback we receive in the staff decision. Somebody asked about the appeal rights. What happens, is there appeal rights? And there are. So decisions from the Redevelopment Commission can be appealed to town council. They can be appealed by staff. They can be appealed by the applicant. So if you were to deny an application, the applicant could appeal your decision, or any person aggrieved by the decision-making body. So a neighbor could appeal a decision if you approve something and they've got concerns with it. They can appeal that. There's a 10-day appeal window after you issue your decision. They submit an application to us, and then the town has to process that appeal hearing before the town council within 60 days of the appeal filing. So it moves pretty quick. If an appeal is filed, we don't introduce new information. It's just taking that application and the evidence that was presented to you, and then take that to town council.
You excuse me, you used the word neighbor. Is that an individual or is that a business?
Either.
Okay.
Yeah, I say neighbor, but the text of the code is any person aggrieved by the decision-making body.
Including an individual.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Correct, yeah.
And to clarify, more than likely we would not see any appeals other than design or signage, because correct me if I'm wrong, we're only making recommendations on the other use types. Even if we recommend denial, does it still go on to planning and town council?
That's a great question. Yeah, if you deny an application, you're recommending denial to the next hearing body. So for a use permit, for example, you're recommending denial to Planning Commission. Their decision can then be appealed. And then town council is the final decision-making body on rezoning applications. And those have kind of a different process. They enter a 30-day referendum period before they go into effect. And fortunately, in my career, I've not experienced that. So what happens after a project is approved? The applicant can then move on to submittal of their construction drawings. So those are the really fine detail of the construction of the site. It includes engineering, final landscape design, building construction. There is opportunity for an applicant to submit their construction drawings at risk before they receive approval. So sometimes we will start review of those CDs after an item has come to the Redevelopment Commission. If you guys are generally comfortable with the design, they've addressed all of staff's comments, we will allow them to submit their construction drawings as we wait a final decision at a hearing. After those CDs have been reviewed, we issue permits, and then construction begins, and we inspect the property throughout the process for a variety of things related to the building, engineering inspections. And then before a building can be occupied, we issue a certificate of occupancy, and then we'll accept any public improvements. If they've built a roadway, for example, we have to accept those improvements into our system. I think that might be it. Happy to answer any more questions you have.
Is it the applicant's decision or the town's decision to take their project before us as a study session versus straight to a vote? Who kind of makes that decision?
It's the town. Sometimes we'll have an applicant say, hey, I'd really like to go to study session. But often, we work pretty closely together with them. But if an applicant says, I don't want to take it to study session, but staff wants your feedback, we'll bring it.
I just wanted to thank you for presenting that. That is very helpful. I think just knowing that we're more of the design review rather than, the engineering and the functionality and just everything that goes into. They're already doing so many steps to make sure it's done right and up to code that we can focus more on what we're here for. So I really appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, Ashley, thank you so much
Yeah,
for
you're welcome.
the work you put into the presentation and the presentation itself. I think it was very beneficial for all of us.
Great,
So,
thank you.
with that, there are no items on the public hearing, so we will move to communications. I personally don't have any updates. Are there any updates or communications from our council liaison, Councilmember Tilkey? I don't think she was able to join us, but
Councilmember Tilkey was not able to join us, is not present, so she has no updates.
all right. Do we have any updates from the commissioners that they would like to share? Good.
I mean, I just that I got married, so.
Congrats, by the way.
And we say update.
Congratulations.
It's very easy to say.
Please note that for the minutes.
Yes. Well, once again, I'll say, Adam, congratulations. Sydney, is there a report from staff?
Chair Clausen, we have a few updates for you guys. First off, I want to congratulate Adam Baugh for becoming part of the commission. This is the first time we've had a full commission in 6 months, so we're very grateful to have all of you here and all the time that you provide for the town and for the Heritage District specifically. So thank you all and welcome, Commissioner Baugh. We just have a few other updates that are Heritage District related. We have had 3 restaurants that have been announced in the last month that are coming to the Heritage District. The first one is Prep and Pastry, which is going to be located at Building 313 on that ground floor where Bayou Creole Kitchen previously was located. They plan to open in the fall and have submitted for construction documents for tenant improvements. Not Your Typical Deli, which is a beloved local Gilbert restaurant that is located right near our town hall, has announced that they are relocating to the building behind the Farmhouse restaurant. So they have already closed their doors at their current location and are planning to open at the end of July in that small building behind the Farmhouse. And we're very excited to welcome them here and keep a local Gilbert business. Big Chicken, which is a chicken restaurant chain owned by a number of partners, most notably Shaquille O'Neal, has announced that they'll be located in the Heritage District where Pomo was previously located. Pomo did close their doors in May, and we're excited to open another chain in the downtown, but they have not announced the exact date of which they are coming in, but we'll keep you updated on when they open their doors in that old Pomo location. Additionally, the 4th floor improvements at the University building for the University of Arizona expansion is expected to be completed by the end of July. So we've stayed on construction for that project, and they are expected to be completed by the end of July with furniture moving in by the end of July, early August. The estimated enrollment for U of A for the fall of this year is approximately 250 students, and Park University, which is the second university that shares the building, is estimated to have an enrollment of approximately 500 students. So we're looking at about 750 students in the university building this fall, which is incredibly exciting. You might have noticed that the passenger loading zones in the Heritage District have recently received a repaint. So we did paint the ground of the Heritage District passenger loading zones with some fun identifiable colors throughout the district. So on the west side, you're going to notice they're going to be painted orange. On the east side, they are now blue. So please check them out when you have a moment. Additionally, we have received the first of 3 sets of construction document submittals for the Heritage Park project, previously called Heritage North, which you all worked on. The development team is planning to demo the existing Burger King on the site in September, kicking off the construction process for the site. It is expected that the construction for the entire site will take approximately 2 years, reaching completion hopefully in 2024 for all components of the site. And that's all I have for you guys. Thank you, Chair Clausen.
Sydney, thank you very much. With that, meeting is adjourned. It's 6:51. Thanks.